Hey guys, what's up? Shadowlands back from another video. Today I wanted to talk about the Destiny PvP meta, how it's being affected by the PvE meta currently, if you want to call it that, and is there really even a meta right now? That's actually a really questionable thing to think about right now, just because we don't know if there's a meta, or if there is, it's not very well settled right now, and honestly, I like that, and I'm going to get into that in just a minute. In the past, what we've seen as far as metas are concerned is that there has been a selection of weapons, especially during House of Wolves. The best example is Thorn, Hawkmoon, and Last Word were the only things people used in trials during the House of Wolves. However, what I'm talking about is previously, you had it so that there were a selection of weapons, maybe 10 weapons, that you had to use or else you were playing PvP wrong. Like, if you didn't use one of these 10 weapons, you were playing PvP wrong. People would not want you on their team, or you just simply would not perform as well as someone else using one of those 10 weapons. You saw a lot of Fellwinter's Lies, Party Crashers, and Matadors. That's what I believe they were called, Matador 64s. You saw a lot of people using Galahorn during heavy rounds and trials. You saw a lot of people using Hawkmoon, Last Word, and you also saw some Hopscotch Pilgrims if people were lucky enough to get a good roll on it. I deleted mine, and that was a dumbass move by me, but my main point is there was a very select few weapons that were considered acceptable for PvP use. Now we're seeing the point where you can get to the highest light level and get high light level items that are competitively viable from every single archetype of weapon. Now we're not looking at, okay, let's say that, okay, fast rate of fire scout rifles and low damage scout rifles. The Hung Jury sort of falls in between here, but it has a high stability. Different things are appropriate for different archetypes, and that is making it so that we're not looking at individual weapons that are overpowered, we're looking at archetypes of weapons that are overpowered. For example, the best one I can think of right off the bat is the Doctrine of Passing in Arminius D example in Soulstealer's Claw as of the April update, where you have the highest rate of fire and minimal impact version of auto rifles. Now, that's a very interesting thing because we have never once seen that in the Destiny meta before, or what has been considered the meta in the past. However, now that is the most viable option for an auto rifle, unless you just happen to have a god roll Hacken's Hatchet, or if you swap over the next so you go bump up by 1 damage ratio and bump down by 1 fire rate ratio, so something similar to that. The Silimar's Wrath, I believe, is another one. I could be wrong there. Don't quote me. The point is, that is the next tier down, but it's not as acceptable to use as the first one. And this is true across all different types of weapons. Scout rifles, hand cannons, auto rifles, and pulse rifles. That's true for all of them. And what's very interesting is we're not now seeing that, okay, you have to use these weapons. And it's not like this archetype is okay. It's like this weapon in this archetype is good to use. And everything else, whether it's in the same archetype or not, is bad. That's what it was previously. Now we're saying, okay, these archetypes of weapons are good. And that encompasses so many more weapons, so many more options, so many more possible roles and creative things for people to come up with in order to compete. And that makes Crucible, in my opinion, so much more fun. And in fact, I would even go so far as to say it is more skill-oriented, because you can't just expect, oh, their team is going to have Last Words, Hawkmoons, and Thorns, so we can expect what to do and we can counter that, or we can just do the same thing ourselves. Everyone uses the exact same stuff, so everyone knows what to expect. For a while during the Taken King, we saw that with the 1,000-yard stare, because everyone was using that. Currently, we still see a lot of Party Crashers being used, but overall, it's nowhere near as bad as it used to be. And there was quite a while over the past few months where the Mida Multi-Tool was the king of Crucible. But given that it was a scout rifle and it was a high rate of fire scout rifle, there were still some people that outright didn't like that style of weapon and they could not get comfortable to it. So it wasn't so broken and overpowered as Thorn was during Year 1 during the House of Wolves. So overall, I gotta say, I like that a lot more now, where we don't really have a set meta. We don't have that group of weapons that is unacceptable to use anything outside of for trials or competitive gameplay. Iron Banner is another good one. Moving on, I want to talk about how PvE is affecting PvP now, because I think this is actually an enormous thing. First of all, we're seeing the introduction of a lot of new weapons. That always changes the PvP meta, regardless of where the weapons come from, whether it's PvE or PvP, whether it's your Vanguard vendor or your Crucible vendor, your Raid drops or your Trials of Osiris drops. New weapons and new gear are always going to affect the PvP meta. So what we're looking at now is, okay, so we got a bunch of new weapons added from Varix packages, from Petrovenge packages, or Queen's Wrath, I think is what they're called. And, yeah, we're seeing a lot of new weapons come in. So how is that going to affect the meta? Well, previously you have to think, okay, we have these very high rate of fire auto rifles that have low impact, and they're very, very overpowered right now, the Doctrine of Passing and the Arminius D. Well, we just saw the introduction of the Soulstealer's Claw from the Varix packages, from the House of Judgment packages, and that is in the same archetype. So if you get the right roll on that, you're going to be looking at a very strong weapon right now. That weapon is going to compete with the Doctrine of Passing and the Arminius D, which are currently in that archetype and are very important in the PvP meta right now. So you're seeing the introduction of new competition and more options. So if you don't like the fact that Doctrine of Passing usually comes with counterbalance, I don't know why you wouldn't like that, but let's just say for a second you don't like that. You have the option to get other things. I saw someone earlier today have a Soul Stealer's Claw with rangefinder, and I forget whether it was armor-piercing rounds or high-caliber rounds, but they had a very interesting roll on their Soul Stealer's Claw, and I was fighting against them in Crucible and found myself dying to them a lot, and it was a very interesting fight to have because every time I would gum up with them, I would usually be on the losing end. It was very interesting because it was hard to get my head around something that was new that I hadn't seen before, and we're seeing all these different kind of roles. It's very interesting that a lot of these new PvE roles, unlike PvP roles, tend to not have set roles on them. So when you get Trials packages for 1 week, there's usually one perk that all weapons will have, and then you'll get a second perk that is random. That's a lot less customization than you get when you get something from a Varix package, from a House of Judgment package, from a Vanguard package, or just from an outright Ingram drop. You're going to be getting a lot more possible roles. On top of that, you have new weapons. That immediately creates countless new options for weapons, weapon combinations, and performance. That's how PvE is primarily affecting PvP. The secondary way you can see that is that Trials and Iron Banner and things that are in PvP that are affected by your light level and the light level of your items, previously you could only really get that through playing PvE content. Now you can also get it through PvP. Now you've been able to get it from Trials of Osiris for a while, but that was also kept very exclusive to some very highly skilled members of the PvP society in Destiny. Now we're seeing that through Iron Banner and also some more casual PvE activities, such as strikes, for example, is actually a really great example. You're seeing it from quest lines, you're seeing it from obviously the Prison of Elders, which quite frankly is a lot easier than any raid that's been newly released has ever been. Prison of Elders, quite frankly, I'm almost disappointed with because it's so easy. Now that being said, there's an upside and downside. It's definitely allowing more people to get into and compete with Trials of Osiris and Iron Banner because they're high enough light level now to compete. Previously, those people, when we were in the between 310 and 320 range, they may have been hovering in the 290, maybe early 300s range, and they would be seeing that definite decrease in their damage if they're fighting against us in Trials of Osiris or Iron Banner, and definitely notice that they're taking more damage and dying faster, regardless of what their actual skill level was. So now we're not able to see that as much because everyone is now high light level. If you guys have ever seen the movie The Incredibles, Syndrome says something at the very end of the movie: when everybody is super, nobody is. And so that's something to think about. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? And I want to argue for a moment that that's actually a good thing. I know people tend to think about, oh, but I put all my time into the game to get really good, to get high light level gear, and to be this competitive. Well, you have to think about for a second, is that really what makes you competitive, having a definite edge over somebody else? Yes, it's great to put in the time, but your gear, excuse my tongue, will reflect that. If you have Trials of Osiris gear, that's something that maybe a casual player may not have. However, they will have raid gear or strike gear that is the same light level so that they can compete, or faction gear is another way to get it as well through faction packages. I had completely forgotten that, to be honest. Anyway, the point is, you then have where you can have PvE players compete with PvP players on even playing grounds, even if their skill level is different. There is not that handicap that they are kind of incorrectly have imposed on them, and I think Bungie really thought about that when they released the April update. I think that's part of the reason the meta right now has been shifted drastically, and part of the reason that any weapon is acceptable, because you see a lot of people who are new to PvP, new to competitive PvP, coming in and using new weapons that previously they had no experience with using in PvP. So you see this now, and I think it's a really fantastic way to incorporate more people into the PvP world, make the game stronger, bring more people back, and I think it's a fantastic way to move Destiny forward into year 3, year 4, and keep going. If we can hold on to this sort of archetype of the game where everyone is on equal playing grounds, if they just devote a little bit of time to the game, a casual amount of time to the game, they're not crippled because they can't put in hours and hours of work. Yet your gear is still exclusive because you may have Trials gear, which is very special because nobody else who plays casually is likely going to have that, and if they do, they definitely won't have a full set that I know that a lot of people have. So some drops will still be exclusive, but they don't make you better. It's more of an aesthetic. That's what I wanted to leave off with today, guys. Keep that thought in mind as you play Destiny PvP over the next few weeks, and just kind of form your own opinions. I would love to hear from you guys in the comment section below, and I will see you guys in the next video. Shadowlands out.